I'd like to pull items 6 and 7 from the consent agenda. I have a couple of questions that I wanted to raise. So if we could just pull those and add them wherever it's most convenient.
Okay, so what I will do is items 6 and 7, I'll move from consent, and under old business, I will insert them right before item 10. Is that good?
It's fine. Thank you.
I'm sure move approval of the regular agenda and consent agenda with the modifications as stated by member of the board.
Second. Thank you. Motion by member Pinkerton, second by member Cornell. Any other discussion or any other requests to move items from our consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, is any, I'm gonna ask for, but all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Madam Chair, the YouTube apparently online doesn't have sound.
No sound on YouTube. I'm not sure who's gonna help with that, if that is, or who will look into that is, if it is Josh, right? Josh or Ashley? Okay, all right, they're on it. All right, so our executive director's report, Edie Kiner, or Christy, you gonna take this or?
So I have one update. We'd like to introduce our new communications manager, Suzette Cook, who you guys have met. She brings a wealth of knowledge and a lot of experience. So we're very excited. As you can see, she's already started taking pictures. And and so would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hi, Suzette Cook. I'm a very proud.
Please, would you go to the mic for us, please?
Hi, I'm Suzette Cook. I'm a proud graduate from the University of Florida's amazing journalism program. So I came up through the ranks, but I'm also a former educator. I taught at Newberry High School, PK Young, College for Kids at Santa Fe, and at the University of Florida. So this position combines my love for communications and helping kids. So I'm very happy to be on here.
Thank you and welcome, Susan.
Welcome.
I did take a couple days to go out and see some of the efforts that are going on out in the county at our summer camps. And I put together a real short compilation of moments. I was so impressed that we are learning art, science, we are learning sports, the kids are making best friends out there. So I wanted to relay to you what I saw. John Moran taught me great how to take photos. So you'll see that influence in these images.
Thank you. And you know, before I called on you, I should have let Mary Chance. We'll come back to you, Ms. Chance.
Oh, that's fine.
Be great. So you'll see that influence in these images.
Thank you. And you know, before I called on you, I should have let Mary Chance. We'll come back to you, Ms. Chance.
Be great.
Thank you. And you know, before I called on you, I should have let Mary Chance. We'll come back to you, Ms. Chance.
Be great.
Here with us, and if you'd like to have a moment now to say a few words.
Sure. Delighted to be here. I am also a graduate of the College of Journalism and Communications and the master's program at UF, and have lived here since the early 80s and been active in the community in a number of ways. I know some people from Rotary and different organizations. My first field was communications, but then moved into nonprofit leadership and education. So my office was in East Gainesville with leading the Education Foundation of Alachua County for 10 years. And then for the past 15 years have led a statewide organization called the Consortium of Florida Education Foundations, where we have 501c3 education foundations in virtually every countywide school district. And I bring them networking, sharing of best practices. We facilitate, this year we'll facilitate about 20 million in public and private funds through our network to advance their work. So a lot of similar themes in terms of re-granting to organizations and measuring their impact and moving the needle in different areas specific to education. So office is here in Gainesville, but because I live in Gainesville and I've been here leading the organization for that long, but we also have 5 other staff members who join me in leading the organization. So delighted to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. So, is it for you? Okay. All right, so we will go now to old business item 6, our
Thank you.
June 2023 programmatic award, expense award. We gotta let our staff person set it up.
Yep.
You want to do general comments first?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm just like all over the place. This is what happens when you don't get your binder and you just read it, everything online. So for the public, we have a time period here at the beginning of our meeting for general public comments. If you'd like to address the trust, you'll have 3 minutes to speak with us. If you please come to the mic, to the lectern here, state your name for the record, and our clerk will be our timekeeper. Is there anyone who'd like to come up from the public and speak to the trust about something that is not an agenda item? Just general comments.
Hi there, I'm Christy Arrington, Executive Director of Girls Place. And I just want to share how great it is this summer with the amount of scholarship assistance that you all have given us. Because it's not a 10-week summer, we were able to use the same funding for a 9-week summer, which meant we had more scholarships to offer. And we shared this with Dion. It's felt really good for a family to say, hey, I can't come anymore. For us to say, but we have help. And how floored our families are realizing that because of the poverty level being 400% or lower, that it expands the reach. And so $90 a week is a really cheap summer for a lot of entities or a lot of people, but for a lot of our families, it's not. So thank you all very much for that.
Thanks, Christy, for that update. And if there's anyone else, if you all would please kind of queue up, come on, kind of queue up for us so we can.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Roundtree. I am the Community Development Manager for our local Boys and Girls Clubs here in Alachua County. The Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Florida has been serving our community for about 60 years. The 4 counties they serve, Alachua, Clay, Duval, and St. John's. Here in Alachua, though, we're very unique. We have been serving this community for about 75 years. I've come into this role in the last 3 months, been attending meetings, just wanted to make sure that I put a name to the face. If you guys have any questions about the Boys and Girls Club, we're looking for any ways to collaborate with us. We are here and you can reach out to me. So good seeing a lot of familiar faces on here.
Thank you. Anyone else? All righty, there's no one else. We'll move on to item 6, our June 2023 programmatic award and expense report.
So thank you for moving this, Madam Chair. I had just a couple of questions. I like this report because it lets me see what we're funding and what the budgeted amount. It's hard to tell though with some of the programs because of the timing of them, what % they should be at and have some sense. So I was hoping that staff could add a column that just would give us some indication of where they should be billing wise, because there are some that are close to 0% billed. They have no billing, and some actually have 0 billing year to date. And the other request I would have with this, and also it's one of my questions for the next item, is can we make it as of the most recent closed month? Because I know sometimes invoices come in right in the under the wire, and it would just be good to have it as of 5/31, June 30. I know it means because we meet so early that the report we'd have now would be as of 5/31, but still it would be a full month. So those 2 things, because I was very concerned as I looked at this list at how many programs were really minimally billed. So if that could just, it could be, and it may be that the program is small enough that they only bill quarterly, but it's hard to tell, whether it's just that the program is unable to bill. And I kind of like to know, do they need extra help? Are they having issues with getting their bills in? Do they need some additional support, or are they just not using the funds to the degree that we thought? Because then those are funds that if we think are going to be available, we then have some opportunity earlier in the year perhaps to use them. So that was just a request to know which ones we think should be where.
So we pinpointed or reviewed some of them that were really, really low. And I want to highlight some of that for you and let you know why. So the PALS program, Youth Mental Health Program, is at 9% of building. Right. And they are still waiting on a signed contract for the new COLA raises. And PAL finance person is out on disability. Also at 9% is Child Advocacy Center. And it is low because of hiring due to they don't have enough staff to
They haven't
do the
been able to find.
billings. Yeah. So they're supposed to have 3 therapists, but they only have 1. So
Yeah.
that's where they are at. And
Sorry, I'm getting old. Can you talk to me about it?
Or into the mic. Is her mic on, Judge?
hello. Okay. So transformative professionals is at 7%. And we're currently working with them. They have invoicing challenges. And so
They have what challenges? I hear you.
invoicing
Invoicing.
challenges. So we're currently working with them to work that out. Some other ones that have extremely low is Cade Museum. The contract manager has spoken with their fiscal department and they are in the process of becoming current. Also, they've had a lot of turnover as well. So that's just some of the highlights. Is there anything else?
It was
specific?
not just specific. It just seemed to me that they were truly all over the map. You've got some as high as 80% and then some that are at 0. And, you know, in most situations, there's a point at which you have to have your billing submitted by, or you
Right.
you kind of hit a threshold of invoice limitations. And so I just think, first of all, it's something we ought to look at and be aware of. And then my question is, if they're having this great difficulty because they can't hire somebody to do billing, what is it that we might be able to assist with? Do we get them QuickBooks, so that they're able to do that with fewer people? Are there some things that we could help them build into their budget that we could support to make that whole invoicing process more consistent? So that we know where we stand financially and they know where they stand. I can't, the cash flow, I worry about their cash flow if they're having infrastructure issues that make it hard to bill us.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So, sorry, I feel like I'm too far. You are absolutely right. About it falls all over the place. So some may be 80%, some may be much lower. Some of those that are lower also started contracts much later. Specifically how we were designed, not necessarily when the contract was executed, but we may not have funded them because some of them were programs that came and spoke to us and then we started it later in the year. We are also working directly with a lot of them, our fiscal department, as well as programming. We've scheduled meetings to assist them with those very same things. For an example, if someone is having some hiring difficulties, we post it ourselves. We use our partnerships with Community Foundation, the Chamber, to get information out for them as well. And then we also had some amendments halfway through the year, which required a delay in invoicing for many of the programs. But you are absolutely right when you look at this. However, Diana was able to pull the percentage. We're able to look at the notes in the contract manager file and then take a look at how we can support.
So just maybe some notation that lets us know that,
Yes.
yeah, we know it's low, or it's low because of timing, or it's, there are a whole myriad. Summer programs, for example, are going to have, right. So it would help to, you guys know which ones. You can look at the list and know. We have to think about it, remember, and go back through minutes. So it would just be helpful to have some information. Thank you. Thanks for that info, though. That's very helpful.
I think also for item 6 for that report, if a date could be on there, like the expense amount for date. I feel
It's
like
as of, so that one was as of June 27th. And that's what I'm saying. It'd be great to just have it as of a closed month. So it's You can say it's, through May 31st, and then we know it's a closed month. Everything that was gonna come into that month is in and logged.
So mine doesn't have
Yours didn't have that?
mine 6 doesn't have a date up at the top. So, okay.
It might have been in someplace else that I saw it then.
The
Yeah.
item 7 did have the date, but yeah, 6, I didn't see that.
Oh, yes.
Didn't notice
As
that.
prepared as of June 27 is the month.
But we don't know.
I'm assuming that we're prepared as of June 27 means that's everything you had reported as of.
That's the report, but that is that.
So that's everything that had been recorded as of the 27th of June.
As of the 23rd.
Well, okay, for both of those, for 6 and 7, it was as of, so then it would be good to have that at the top. I saw it at the bottom and made that assumption, which was bad for me to do. Assumptions are never good.
So member Pinkerton, did you have questions on this right here?
I already talked to him earlier.
Oh, you already got your question out the way?
I tried to.
Okay, all right. Anything else, member? LeBlanc?
Not on 6, so
All right, so you're done with 6, 7. You want to go to 7?
Well, let's move to receive the report and ask that she make those changes for the next meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Go ahead, second.
All right, move by member Dr. Labarda, second by member Cornell. Any other discussion, any public input? Anybody on the phones, Ashley? Okay, thank you. All in favor of receiving the report with the for staff to make the modifications as requested? Vote aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, item 7, which is our third quarter income statement.
And it's the income statement and balance sheet. So my question here is the same thing. Can we please choose the most recent closed month so that we have everything in it? And I did have a question on this one. The ad valorem taxes are still not at 100% of budget. Do those come in a lump? How does that?
They're still trickling.
They're
in.
still trickling in.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
I
it-
wasn't sure how those.
Typically, the majority of them get in by March 1st,
Okay,
and then we get delayed.
so there's.
But we budget for 95% of them.
Okay. And then I was looking and grant awards program line again is only 25% used. And I'm assuming that's because where we are with some of the invoicing issues, right? But that's, again, when I look at the overall and see that only 21% of the grant funds have been expended year to date, that worries me a little bit.
Summer is our biggest chunk of the budget and we just started.
Right. It's just good to have that information. As like I said, you live and breathe it, and I remember how that is. And then the board comes in and goes, what? So I appreciate the clarifications. But that was it. My only request here is, can we just have a closed month so we know everything is in it?
So if I may, the reason why everything is through the middle of June is because the Florida statutes require that we produce a quarter report, and given the time that we had to produce it and produce the book and upload, we could only do it through the 23rd. So that's why we have a partial month, but we have discussed doing it in arrears, and having a closed month. And yes, we will do that going forward, but that is the reason why we are at June 23rd this month, because of board policy and the statute.
Diana, for the quarterly report, is there like a deadline as to when it has to be filed? So I was wondering if possibly, like if we could you could, for June, we meet so close to June 30th that maybe you didn't file it. I mean, prepare it and present it to us in August. If that would give you a month's time to get it kind of closed out where it'd be a little bit more complete. And then you file it with the state in August. Would that meet the deadline for the quarterly filing with state statute?
I'll review the statute.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would.
I think it would.
Yeah.
Because mostly people do want closed periods to do those reports. So
But I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking it would, but.
I'm right with you. I don't know. But thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Diane.
Anyone else have any discussion or questions? Any public input on this particular agenda item, the third quarter income statement and balance sheet?
Move approval of it.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by member Pinkerton, second by member Labarda. All in favor? If there's no public input and no board discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you, Diana, for addressing our concerns. All right. So, number 10. We
No,
did
she
nine.
did, we did.
We did nine. I skipped that when I did it out of order, my bad, sorry. So we just had, we introduced Suzanne and we're gonna try to play our video at the end of the meeting. That she prepared. So, our tentative budget, fiscal year 23-24 tentative budget, so I'll turn it over to the staff member.
We made some updates to the budget based on the comments we had last month. And there are notes to that came with. I'm not sure if you want me to go through those notes or if you have additional questions for me.
So what are your members, what's the pleasure of the body? You want to go through them? Lee has some questions, so I think go ahead and go high level through. Go ahead.
Okay. So ad valorem revenues, we recently had the property appraiser certify the revenues to us, tax revenue to us. So this is reflective of the update. Interest is based on earnings on deposits on the State Board Administration Prime account. And one of the things I was telling Lee is that it was low in the current budget, but high I'm projecting in next year's budget is because the interest rates on the pool have changed drastically. So in 2021, it was 0.11%. In 2022, it was 0.85%. But in the current year, it's 5.36%. So this is why we're earning so much, and I'm just trending forward. Other sources, general fund expenditures will use $2,753,000 from fund balance to complete the obligations as budgeted.
Diana, what is that other sources? What's in that?
Well, that's basically what we're using from fund balance. So
Got it. Okay, it's the fund.
This sheet of paper, part of the information.
Okay.
1.6.
I had that question too, then, Lee.
And the 1 million, and there's an additional 1 million from the fund balance that is going towards the building.
yes,
So that's about 2.6 million of the 2.75 or 7, whatever, the 2.725,806.
yes. So that takes care of transfers. Also in the transfers, aside from the 1 million, is we are funding literacy by $40,000. And expenses, personnel services remain the same and reflects an increase of 35,000 over the current year. Operating change includes an extra month of rent to provide additional time to find a building. Grant awards has been returned to current levels. And I passed a detail out of the difference between what was handed out last month and the current month, returning it to current levels. Grants,
I'm sorry, when you say return to current levels, what these are all taken out? That's on this list? Added.
yes. So our current level budget is 7.7 million. So next year we're budgeting the same 7.7 million.
And that's where that general fund transfer in is needed, so that, or the fund balance uses in, right?
Yes.
It's gonna come from fund balance.
Capital expense, we are hopeful to find a building. Transfers out. It is the capital and the literacy, and reserves is 5%.
Move receive report.
So second,
I'll second for discussion.
okay, for discussion.
And-
You wanna make some changes?
Our question is, when are we gonna get into the meat of this? Because there are certain parts of this that I'm very much not comfortable with. You know, the fact that I know you get tired of hearing it, but we're dipping into this, the fund balance. And the number that I think that through, that I've gleaned, is about, we have, after everything is paid for, taken care of, we have about $5.5 million in fund balance. And Don, correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe that's the number that we're working with. So that includes, you know, that what is taken out is the capital expense of $3 million, and as well as the reserves that we have to have, which is probably about $500,000, I would imagine. So the fund balance is actually higher than that, than 5.5, but we have to account for those two expenses. So we have $5.5 million in reserve. What's being proposed is if I'm correct, about 1.6 of that 5.5. And I just have a real problem with spending something that is not recurring on expenses that are recurring. And so, you know, I'll vote in favor of accepting this, but when are we actually going to get it as a board discussing what we're going to do with the budget? Because, you know, some of these programs on here have been funded they've been funded ever since we've been funding programs. And so we need to go through and to determine which ones, you know, why these were decided to not fund out of that $7.7 million. I think Christy wants to respond.
So it is in August when we are supposed to bring back the funding recommendations specifically for the fund balance, is specifically what you're asking for. These programs were due to end September 30, but the board did vote to extend their funding for 6 months into the new fiscal year, which is why they're still being funded. So what you're asking is what we've been working on internally as it relates to our approved strategic plan recommendations for fund balance as well.
Well, you know, and I really think that probably what we need is a workshop, a budget workshop. And so we can sit down and discuss that, not in this setting, but go ahead and really get into the meat and potatoes of the budget. Because I think that there needs to be a discussion about what we're going to do with the fund balance. You know, we've been talking about it every year. We've been eating at it for a couple of years now. Last year was not an insignificant amount. And I think that we need to decide as a board, you know, how do we want to spend it? Do we want to spend it on one-time expenses? How much of a balance do we want to have? Because I personally don't think that $500,000, having seen what happened when there was a downturn, what impact it was, it would be nice perhaps to have a little bit more than the minimal 5% in order to make sure that we don't have to cut some of the programs because we don't have the money. Madam Chair, I would like to have it. I think that the board probably needs to have, you know, some, you know, set aside some time for, you know, 2, 3, 4 hours to however long we deem necessary before we get into either the August meeting or that. I think probably want to do it, you know, sometime this month or beginning of next month. Because September is when we have to approve the budget.
Okay. So
Madam Chair, I share that concern almost to the letter. My back of the cocktail napkin math was that we were dipping into 2 million in fund balance or close to that, just to fund what we've got here in terms of personnel, operating and grant awards. Just subtracting out that from what we're going to get in ad valorem. And I think we have to have a clear glide path between what we fund this year and how we go forward. So I would support needing that.
Member Cornell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I support that too. I'm looking at page 59 in our book, which is the balance sheet on tab 7. And my issue, so page 59. And so my issue is, when you look at us reducing programmatic funding, and then you also in the same breath say that we have $14.6 million in cash, you can't do that with a straight face. And so I'm all about getting the money into the community and working simultaneously with what you and Maggie just said, which is a path forward of utilizing fund balance down to some level. I think it's actually a little bit more than your back of the napkin calculation. I think you're close. It's between 4 and 5 million. I think you're close. But I also know that we're going to have another year of good values. And so I don't want to spend fund balance every year or spend more than we're bringing in. But I also know that we haven't in 4 years spent what we budgeted. We just had a conversation that shows many of our providers aren't spending. So we know that money's coming back through fund balance at the end of this year. And so I just don't want us to say on paper, oh, we can't use fund balance when we know that we're actually not spending what we're budgeting. We just kind of know that. So I don't mind budgeting a little bit more as part of our fund balance because we got to get this money into the program so that they can affect the community. And so I am completely with you, but I think as an organization, we're not, we haven't been a county for 100 years. And so, how we use fund balance at the county all the time. And I don't have any problem with budgeting a little bit more this year, knowing that we are fine on the balance sheet.
Correction, we are not reducing programs.
Right. But we just made that modification with this budget.
Right.
From last meeting where we actually were reducing.
No, that was an oversight. Even last month, we were
Okay.
not reducing. It was just the way that it was notated on the document, but we
Okay.
all left saying, well, we're not reducing.
Okay, and that's my only fear is that the public thinks
Right.
that we are reducing programming when we're actually not. So as long as we're not reducing programming, I am all about reallocating it the way the strategic plan says, and I am all about a workshop. For sure, because I think we've got to kind of set, we have basically seven more years under the statute. So we've got to kind of set unless it gets redone, set a glide path of how are we going to get that fund balance into the community without spending money that we don't have. And I think putting the 3 million aside was a good move. That's basically our fund balance. But if we don't get this money into the provider's hands and into the community, we're not going to have the results that we need to renew this thing in 7 years. And so I just want to keep pushing that every year, keep pushing that.
Chair,
And I know you do too.
Chair certain member Hart is trying to.
Okay. Member Cornell, are you done?
Yes.
Are you? Okay, Member Hart, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I have 3 things to add to this discussion, and I'm somewhat in alignment with all 3 of the previous board members who spoke about the notion of fund balance. I don't have a problem at all with having us workshop about the subject of fund balance, because I think we as a group need to decide what's a reasonable fund balance to maintain. And I don't think it's easy for us to figure that out just looking at these sheets as we get them in the board meeting. And I could make a suggestion that relates to my experience doing finance on other boards. And that is, if we trend our data over time, we'll learn something really important. I don't know what that is, but if we trend our data, we're a rather new organization. We're going to learn how we need to operate in terms of maintaining fund balance. And second of all, I'm not too worried about our notion of the community believing that we're reducing programs, because we have just hired a new communications director who's incredibly dynamic. And I think one of the things the board would like to charge her with is making sure the community understands how how children are being served. And I think people don't know how many children are being served, what we're doing to serve children, how we're quality controlling those dollars spent, and how we're being accountable to taxpayers. I think there should be a constant message from our communications director that we are accountable to our taxpayers. We care a lot about what they think about what we're doing. And then the third comment, and then I'll be done, is we need to adhere to our strategic plan. Whatever we decide to continue funding or to glide path to a lower funding level or glide path to a higher funding level, I'm okay with, as long as it's consistent with all the work that we've done creating a strategic plan. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I think the part of our funding dilemma, or why we kind of are in limbo, is that we were waiting for the strategic plan to be done. And so we just adopted that last meeting, like a month ago, in which our tentative budget was also on the same agenda. So I think we're kind of in there, and I'm not adverse, I'm not against having another meeting. I don't think we can do it, leave my schedule. Between now and the end of the month, it's just not going to be doable. But I think 1st of August, we can schedule something. Would be better. Yeah.
Maybe even before the board meeting, we'll get into that.
Yeah. So maybe I'll after that we can, if everyone's agreeable to that, out before the week before the board meeting. You think?
I was thinking just that period, like we did the workshop where we workshopped it, took a break, had our board engaged.
Oh, you're saying the same day. I'm sorry.
If it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, that date is
1 to 3:30 and then we.
And then take a break and then.
Yeah.
So that would be the 7th.
No, 14th. Our next meeting is August 14th.
Yep. Yeah.
So Judge Ferraro, would that work for your schedule? I know you're kind of scheduled out a lot of times.
If you, if
You quick.
I leave that blank.
That day for the,
For
okay.
the meeting, I can do it.
So hopefully everyone else's schedule will accommodate that, and we do it beforehand and say, we think 2 hours is going to be enough, or will we, and we can work out the time.
1 to 3:30.
1 to 3:30. Okay. Okay. I do need a motion to accept what we've been given and or to.
And schedule a fund balance workshop.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a 3-part motion. First part is that we accept the report provided by staff, number 1. Number 2, that we have meeting, a budget workshop prior to the August 14th regular meeting. Time to be determined by staff. It looks like it's probably 1 to 3:30 or so. And then third, I would like two pieces of information. Number 1, I would like to hopefully get some information about perhaps what the property appraiser thinks we might be looking to as far as increase in property values percentage wise. Number 1. Number 2, that we get as much as we can unadulterated fund balance number. In other words, what it really is.
And Lee, when you say that the first part of the third part of the motion, the percentage, are you asking the property appraiser what he's anticipating for January 1st of 2024? Or what he's anticipating for this final tax rolls for this year?
What he would use for the next year. We know what it is this year.
Yeah, so
But if he can
any preliminary information about, I mean, it's as of January 1st of 2024.
right, and the reason for that, Ken, is because if you stated that we think that it might still be a good year, and hopefully it will be. If we know that, say, it's going to increase 5% or 6% or some number, if we go into the fund balance by 5 or 6%, then okay, that makes sense.
Okay, I see what you're thinking. Yeah.
So but we'll also have other expenses as well with the staff and that.
Yeah, in talking to Power and in talking to Ms. Solomon 2 weeks ago at a constitutional self-insurance meeting, their number that they were thinking conservatively was 7 to 9.
Okay.
But they're not sure.
Okay. But if staff can
Let staff do an independent call.
see if they would be willing to put themselves out, then probably Grace's office. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public input? I want to bring it back to the board. Yes, Judge Juan.
I'll support the motion the way it's worded. He didn't say a specific time, but when we're deciding the time, if we could do 1:15 to 3:45, that would be easier because I have a standing meeting from 12 to 1 on Mondays. So it'd be hard for me to get here, but 1:15 would be great.
Okay. All right. Any other board member discussion? Any comments? Okay. So I'm kind of in between where my colleagues are here with everything. I do think we have another meeting. I think I'm not sharing, I share Lee's concern in wanting to have a reserve greater than 5%, but I do think we have sufficient funding to do what's kind of been, I haven't, because I didn't like really like land on anything and get like too hectic, because when I looked at the report, I was like saying, I don't know what date this is of this. And I've asked Nicole to tell you, I remember me asking Nicole, like, when's this as of, so I can know like kind of where we are with this, because, but I do think having another discussion and all before we move forward would be good. So we're ready to vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, now so motion passes. So, Diana, you got what, those two requests that Member Peterson?
Yes.
Okay. You have that. And so this is just like a request. I didn't make it part of the motion there, but when we have the paper there, that's okay. I'll bring a ruler. I was gonna say make some lines so it'll be easy to follow it.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bring a ruler. Read the page. Okay, our listening project, Bonnie.
My name is Bonnie Wagner. I'm the Research Planning and Evaluation Coordinator for the Trust. We have been working.
So would you like talking to the mic, Bonnie, or pull it down where it's kind of more in front of your face there? Thank you.
We have been working with Prismatic to develop some communication products to further share the results of the listening project back to the community, to express gratitude and for all those that participated in the listening project, and also help to incite the data into some action and have people really hear from the voices of the community that spoke to us and took the time to give us such great input and share all the great learnings that we had. So what I included in this packet was some of the listening project products that we have been working on. And we did different versions for different audience types, our parents, the youth, and providers. And we also did a standalone executive summary. You'll see on the one pagers that page is blank. We're looking to also incorporate some of our plans on how we plan to take action, because that's what we promised on the outset of the listening project, that we would hear from our families and then we would use this input to drive what we do moving forward as a trust. So that would be the back page that you see blank on the one pagers. So that is what I have to share, and open to your guidance and suggestions, but that's what I was looking to share, the products that we're coming up to and what we're looking to do moving forward with that, with the help of our new communications manager, to share this information back out with the community.
Is there any public input on the listening project? Any board input?
Move that we receive the report.
Second.
Okay, been moved and second that we received the staff report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Bonnie. Leah?
I'm here to give you an update on the early learning network that I spoke to y'all about in March. We put an update in the board packet last month in the executive director's notes. So part of this is just for you to hear, get the update and know what's going on, or at least what I'm doing. So you just heard from Bonnie about the listening tool, but I keep calling it a listening party, by the way, but the listening project. Part of what we talked about in March is that we were gathering all of that information to help build on what we were doing for early childhood. We're now at that part of convening, and the first thing that we did as a part of that convening was to do a early childhood learning collaborative call to action. We held that in June 13th, and my community partners were the Anita Zucker Center and the Children's Movement. The Children's Movement, as a part of that research part, was doing something called the Future Project. And a few of us in our community actually participated on that as a steering committee. In addition to that, they also came, they spoke to our community, a few of our parents, to really learn what it is that they want to do across early childhood education. And so it's a huge project and it's still ongoing. They're finalizing what that roadmap should look like. But they were able to really gather a lot of movement across the state, including our community as well. So at that meeting, they were able to share some of that input at our meeting. Anita Zucker Center was able to also share the Sunshine Portal, which is actually a really neat thing to be able to see what our community looks like in terms of how many early childhood businesses that we actually have here, how many kids are attending those. We can see the gaps, we can see where we don't have centers and where we need more. That is something, that's a work that they have been doing for a while now for the state of Florida. So as they continue to build upon that, we're still utilizing that. 25 people attended this call to action. It included families, educators, advocates, government, chamber of commerce, businesses, early learning organizations. So when you look at, in your presentation, you'll see that, I don't know if it is a color. So you'll see the red, blue, and the green. For this meeting, we were at the blue, where it says early learning development. And then of course, I believe that family leadership and support wraps around everything. So it included those two arms. So that's where we are for this particular call of action. In March, I also said, what do we think early learning system needs? What did we imagine? And I kind of listed all of those things. For sake of time, I'm not going to read all of them. But that's what we still talked about, even in this meeting, what we believed it needed, what it should look like. What are the things that we can probably support to have a thriving community and children that are and families that could benefit from what we do here at the Trust. Also in March, you also approved a couple of programs for funding. One of the ones that you approved was Head Start Summer Bridge. Our community partner with that is Episcopal Children's Services. It started in June. The length of time is 8 weeks, so it'll be over by July. 4 early learning centers are actually participating in that. We started off with 6, but we're at 4 learning centers, 59 children between ages 3, 4, and 5, and they're located in High Springs, Newberry, and Archer, and Gainesville. The next one you funded was for social and emotional development. We are doing summer school for parents and professionals. It is using the, I'm gonna get the name wrong, so I wanna make sure I say it right. The Circle Security Parenting and the Circle Security Classroom curriculum. It is an accredited curriculum, meaning professionals can walk away with their CEUs by attending this program. It started last Friday and after hours. We put it on Zoom. They were able to have 52 people register for it. A part of this curriculum will not just be on Zoom, they will also be going out to centers, doing one-on-ones with parents, so that they can really be able to dig in and work with parents who are working with their children. The idea of this was to be able to walk alongside each other, having that child that's there and having parents and educators on the same page on how to be able to work together when we're talking about the behaviors that we see at home, behaviors that we see in school. And that is it. Any questions?
Ms. Jones, do you consider the number of people that attended for the early childhood collaboration a good number?
I consider it a good start. I like the idea that it had the people that were there, it definitely represented our community. It was really important to me that we had families there. The idea that we talk about families, but then we don't invite them into the table, that's really at the heart of what I believe should always happen. We should always have family voice. Of course, we also have to have meetings that are at a time that they can actually attend. So I was really happy that we were able to have families there. We walked away from that meeting, not finished, but walked away from that meeting with 2 work groups, one on parents and one also on the centers, and being able to really hash that out and talk a little bit more.
So you think that number will grow, maybe?
I hope so.
Okay.
It's a hope.
Good. Fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Pinkerton. So Mia, the time of the meeting, so you had the meeting in the evening so the parents could come, or was it during business hours?
It was during the day. So we had it at 11 o'clock in the morning. So it was during the day, couple of hours during the day. Surprisingly, we did get families that were able to attend that meeting, but you're right. In order to have a meeting that has more families, we have to be able to have it at times that parents can actually attend or caregivers can attend.
Is that part of your plan going forward to
It
have
is.
the meeting at a time that's conducive to working parents? Because some of the parents that are likely we're our target, we're trying to reach, may work on jobs where they don't have leave, where they can, so if they miss work, they don't get paid is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
Although, you know, one of the things in Gainesville, it's always been a challenge is people who work night shifts, not having access to a whole lot of stuff because in fact, somehow you have to have that, figure out a time balance that allows, I know childcare for people who work night shifts was always a huge challenge.
It is a challenge. I had somebody ask me that just last week. They work weekends and evenings. And she asked me if I knew of a childcare center and I was like, I know nobody. I mean, which I didn't. I knew one person years ago, but she's not in business anymore.
And so I think it's important that we have access so that we hear what their concerns and needs are too, because otherwise we're just excluding a whole segment that has a lot of needs, I think.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Any other questions for me before? Any public input? Anyone on the phones, Ashton? Anybody on the phone, Dr. Hart? You shouldn't have anything. I'm going to motion to receive staff report from staff. Second. Moved by member Cornell, second by member Pinkerton, that we receive the report on our early childhood report. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No, thank you, Mia. All right, item 13, our RFP recommendation for award for RFP 2301 after school programming.
Yes. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, you all should also have the PowerPoint in your packet as I go through the information for the after-school RFP. So I want to make sure I do a recap of how we got here. So our RFP was released May 12th, and that is also when we entered into the cone of silence. We did offer 2 bidders conferences as we do for all of our funding opportunities here with the trust. So our bidders conferences were held on May 23rd. We did have 2 of them. We had a 10 a.m. Bidders conference as well as a 6 p.m. Bidders conference. We had over 50 participants to register and 20 to 30 who actually attended the bidders conference for this after school funding. During that bidders conference, we walked through the entire RFP. We did multiple things. We identified or defined terms. We conducted an application training by walking through all of the required forms and attachments that needed to be submitted. And the bidders conference was recorded. and both of them were recorded, and we placed both recordings on the bid page that we have for the RFP. Anyone who is interested in receiving updates and being notified as we update the bid page, there's also that option where they can enter their email, and every time we add documentation or a recording or any information to the bid page for that funding opportunity, they receive an email. Applicants also had 3 weeks, I believe it was 3 weeks, to submit questions electronically. So even though we're under the cone of silence, the bid conference, they can ask any questions, whether it's technical, whether it's programmatic, they can ask us those questions. And after the bidders conference, they have the opportunity to submit additional questions via our submit a question link. All questions that we receive from the bidders conference that are submitted electronically, we post those on the bid page. And again, there's always that notification that goes out to anyone who has added their email address to that. We also offer 3 different days of office hours. And the office hours are specifically for technical assistance. If you find that the form isn't working for you and you can't quite find something, not necessarily to discuss your program ideas, but to make sure you have all the necessary forms, make sure you understand due dates. You can meet with programs, you can meet with fiscal, and so we offered that as well. No one took advantage of the office hours, but as you can see, we did have some good participation for the bidders conferences. And providers had about 5 weeks to apply for the application or the funding. The application deadline was the 16th, and now we're at the last 2 steps, making funding recommendations, asking for approval, and to begin contract negotiation. I was the project manager for this funding opportunity with help from Demetrica Tyson, who is our program specialist here at the Trust. The minimum qualifications for this funding opportunity. So I know you all are familiar with the main ones, if you will. The services must take place in Alachua County. You must be qualified to conduct business in the state of Florida. And then specifically for this after school RFP, you must have experience working with out of school time youth or working with youth in out of school time. Must be licensed or licensed exempt by the state Department of Children and Families when you submit this application. You must offer services to kindergarten through 8th grade for a minimum of 4 days a week, 1.5 hours a day, extra points for 5 days a week. And enrichment clubs for 9th through 12th grade. Services must be in person, and we wanted those ratios 1:20. The after school RFP, we allocated $1 million, again, K through 8th. We strongly encouraged curriculum for literacy and math, but it was not required. Of the 6 accepted, 2 of them are not implementing a math or literacy curriculum, but focused on ensuring children had a safe place to be after school. 3 of the 6. I'm sorry. Deeper purpose and give me until the end of my presentation, and someone on my staff will let me know that. Probably circus. Yeah, I think you're right. 3 of the other of the 6 specifically mentioned curriculum such as YouFly, Brainchild, Achiever, iReady, Project Lead. Those 3 were Kids Count, Boys and Girls Club, Girls Place. And then 1 program, which is Gainesville Area Community Tennis Association, also mentioned a partnership with Peak Literacy. Of course, as we are negotiating contracts, we will need to do a little bit more research and have discussions with those 6 those 5 or 4 rather, that are mentioning curriculum to ensure that they're meeting the requirements of the RFP. And again, all are Monday through Friday, And we'll be working directly with them for contracting as approved by the board today. The term of service is August 1st through June 30 for the after-school RFP. The target population for this RFP, of course, all families living in Alachua County. We're also looking to work with families whose income less than 400% of the 2023 federal poverty threshold guidelines, children with IEP or 504 plans whose family also meet the income requirements, children from families receiving SNAP benefits, as well as children in foster care, children in involuntary and formal kinship care, and then children under in-home case management supervision. All providers were required to have some sort of attendance policy that will be reviewed during contract negotiation. They were all required to complete site profiles for each site that they're offering. We have 3 programs that have more than one site. And so they were required to submit more than one site profile, site description, program, number of children expected to serve, the types of activities, their program costs, as well as ratio their understanding of having to background screen all of their staff, and then the types of positions that they intend to hire for the program. At a first glance, then during the review, it's about 320 children. And again, that's before the contract negotiation to make sure that number is correct, but it's about 320 that would receive services under this RFP. Of course, all programs will be required to submit the data that we're requiring, which is demographics, participation information, curriculum implementation for those that are going to implement math and reading curriculums, survey and assessment, and then parent and caregiver consent information. The evaluation criteria included project plan, agency stability, budget, as well as the site information. We also, there was 25 points up to each criteria. We allowed 10 bonus points for rural and unincorporated communities, and then 10 points for offering services 5 days a week. The review period lasted about a week, and we had a public deliberation. The scores are attached within the packet, and we did list them based on the highest score, with kids count coming in with 104.25 points, Gainesville Area Community Tennis Association 101.75, Boys and Girls Club 100.25, Girls Place 96, Deeper Purpose 94.25, and Gainesville Circus Center 91. This last slide was the submission instructions, and so this is a part of the RFP. We go through this in the bidders conference. We provide this within the RFP as an opportunity to help the providers make sure they're submitting all the necessary and required documentation for the RFP. Some of the providers attach it to their submission to, check off, show us that they received it. They use it many different ways, but this is a part of the documentation that they receive. Of the 11 applications, 6 of them were accepted that you see there, and then 5 were non-responsive, meaning that they didn't meet the requirements. They were missing some sort of information, documentation that you see there. For the RFP, we allocated $1 million. The total request is a little more than 1.1 million. Again, here I have for you a slide with the organizations as they were scored and their requested amount. And what we are asking the board for is to approve the resolution for this funding recommendation. We are asking the board to authorize us to begin contract negotiation. And what that means is not necessarily that we're asking you to approve each individual amount as you see in your packet, but allow us the opportunity to go back and negotiate the cost, negotiate curriculum, negotiate numbers, what it is that we need to get to a final amount, not to exceed the $1 million that we have for fiscal year 23-24. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yes, Judge Warren.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. Is there somewhere that tells us how many children each organization would be serving during the year?
Yes, each organization within their site profile, they are required to provide us with specifically with that information. So when when the review team reviewed those site profiles and the staff began to negotiate contracts, we're able to look at the numbers that they provided services to last year, what they are proposing this year, whether there's a decrease, increase, and how that matches to the funding amount. If this is something that you are asking me to provide to you, I can absolutely do that.
Well, I'm interested in knowing how much, because it could be a good amount of money for if they're serving one kid, which I'm sure they're not. But I would just like to know how many kids are anticipating serving.
Yes.
That's not in this packet today.
That is not in this packet today, but I can provide you all with that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Member Cornell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christie, how will staff determine if we approve this motion, how we will negotiate an amount from 1.123 million down to $1 million?
So
have you thought that through? Because I would like for us to kind of negotiate with the top 4 first, get them done, because they've added the things that we did not require, but we said we were going to highly value, and I appreciate that. And then and that's $816,401, if anybody's keeping track. And then that would leave $183,000 for the remainder of the $1 million for the bottom 2. But I wanted to know kind of what your thoughts were on that.
that's actually how it's done. So when we completed the RFP, the top, those that scored in the top, those negotiations take place. And then those that scored between, well, they all scored higher. So within the 91 range. So actually what I was about to say doesn't work, but that is the approach that we would take. And that's why we start with those from the top and why I arranged it that way. So those that scored the highest, we start our negotiations there.
So we might pick up a couple of thousand here and there if we don't allow it. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Because
we're going to start with the first and work our way down.
we will. And that is how it's labeled in your packet.
I'd move staff recommendation.
One second.
Okay, is there any other board discussion? Well, actually, before board discussion, is there any public input? Any public input? Anybody on the phone? Come, please come to the mic. If you all would queue up, and you'll have 3 minutes with us. Actually, if we get any phone calls, say something, okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bishop Chris Stokes, and I am with the Willie Mae Stokes Community Center. And we did submit, and unfortunately, I found out that due to whatever the missing attachments were, that we were not approved. As of this moment, still don't know what those missing attachments were. And the unfortunate part of this is that, again, now we would be up to the next funding cycle to reapply. We did attend the bidders conference, all of the information. My concern is that we have done everything that I felt like we needed to do. If we did not score high enough, I would be fine with that. But we don't even have a score because whatever those missing attachments were. And then the category that is listed under is non-responsive, which I don't know what that means. No one has, and I'm not complaining about anybody, but we did not get any if it was something that we did not have, a document that we did not have or could not produce, that's one thing. I went back through the RFP, everything that the documentation I have. I don't know whether it was something that was not attached, but I just feel as though that the community center has missed yet again another opportunity. We have been serving our community for free, 60 to 70 kids since our inception for 4 years. Last school year, we had 70 kids with 17 kids waiting list. Today, as of today, we already have 50 families that are already signed up for after school for Micanopy in rural Micanopy. We have an after school, a back to school bash coming up on the 17th, on the 5th, and we're going to again have signups. I'm used to providing the services for free, but I gotta admit that I am on behalf of the students that we serve and families that we serve, I am disappointed that we're not funded. Like I said, if it was we scored a 40, I got work to do. But for missing documentations or attachments, and because of the tone of silence, I'm out of time. We can't find out what those attachments were. Still don't know what those attachments are. But then once we do find out, you have already given out the money. And here we are, here would we be again, waiting until the next funding time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Stokes. Is there anyone else?
Would you like me to Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, probably the most difficult part of my job is having to look at someone's application and have to mark it as unresponsive. Organizations that we have, worked so hard to meet with, and they attend everything, and they, but it happens every single time. Either someone's late or someone's missing something. What I would like to say is a part of the discussion that I am hoping to have with the board as it relates to our funding and additional opportunities for programs that we're able to look at ways to help organizations, whether that is through innovative grants, whether that is through mini grants to get some of our organizations up to speed and assisting them in a way that they're focusing on their program, focusing on writing grants. But it's hard. It is difficult. And that decision was very difficult, but there are rules I have to follow. There are things in the RFP and in our policies, which end up in the RFP, that makes me have to mark some as non-responsive. In our August presentation, there are some recommendations, some ideas that we have specifically for our rural areas that we'd like to bring back to you. In this moment, however, I can't undo what the policy says we must do. I don't have the authority to do.
I guess my question is, and I want to follow the rules. I am not going, Bishop Stokes, I am deeply grieved that you are where you are, but we entered into a quagmire in December of 21. If I got my date correct, and I was one of the ones who said, I don't think we should do that, because I think that's going to start something, and I can't go back down that, because it makes every funding opportunity get us there. But I guess my question for staff is that if we have a person, organization that's responding to an RFP or RFQ, are there checkpoints where, like, if they've done their submission, can they say, just on first glance, do we have everything in so that if before the closing date, so that they can address those types of things? Are they able to do that during I know the cone of silence will open and.
Those are the office hours. So we had 3 days of office hours where a provider can come in and specifically sit down with us and say, do I have everything that's on the checklist? So that opportunity is there.
Okay.
The staff and I even sat down and said, what can we do differently? How can we, we're going to add a glossary of terms, for our next RFP so that, there's no misunderstanding of terms. We even considered, if providers submitted their application far enough in advance, we can look through it and they can go back and fix, we've thought of all these different things, but they have to come in 2, 3, 4, potentially days in advance so they can actually go back and do the work. The bulk of what we receive comes within the last 20 minutes, and I'm pushing it because I really want to say 15 minutes. The last 20 minutes, and that wouldn't be enough time for providers to go back unless they just didn't attach it. But if they need to go back and do the work, it doesn't necessarily, they would have to get it in, like we will have to shorten the submission rate. You need to have it in 2 weeks before, and so we are thinking about ways we can do things differently. And I think every time we have released something, we've added something to it. We do multiple bidders conferences. We do multiple days of office hours. We're adding glossaries. We go through every tab of the budget document on the bidders conference. And so, I do understand we're under a cone of silence. And so I did, respond to not just Bishop Stokes, but other organizations as well, saying, on the 11th, I am available. Let's walk through it. Let's talk about what happened and how we can prepare you for the next round of funding.
Thank you, Christy. Is there are you standing for public input? James is your first name. I can't remember your last name. Miller. Let's come on.
I'm James Miller, Executive Director for Mirror Image Leadership Academy. I too was one of the organizations that went for the RFP. And I reached out, and the reason for us not receiving the funding for the after-school RFP was due to the license exempt for DCF, in which I reached out to Christy, but due to the cone of silence, she wasn't able to respond to me. And so we submitted the information showing that our organization would be exempt and that we're pending. And I wanted to know, would that suffice for the RFP? And if we needed to show the exemption status at that particular moment. And so I presented all of the information at that particular moment to show that as an organization, we had to go through all of this paperwork, but all of our staff, of course, are level 2 background screen, and we could provide proof for that. And so that was my question. And then that was the feedback that I received. So that's why we were denied as well. And so in the same situation. Thank you also for your time.
Thank you.
Madam, the requirements of the RFP is you need to be licensed or licensed exempt. Everyone is technically pending until DCF is. Yeah.
This DCF one has been a humdinger ever since. Member Cornell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Pastor Stokes, I know the good work you're doing in Micanopy. I also know that what I heard Christy say is that they're going to be working with those that weren't funded and see if they can bring something back to us with some other type of funding opportunities. So I'm going to trust staff on that one because I do want to see if there's a way that we can facilitate some of the good work that you're doing down there. And I'm sorry, I don't know James Miller quite as closely, but with the DCF licensing item, explain to me the exemption versus a non-exemption, because I'm not sure, or maybe Shirley.
Isn't it based on faith? Is it the faith-based or is it?
That as well as age? Yes, that as well as age.
Okay.
I'm not in licensing.
But our RFP requires that
It requires.
Doesn't allow exempt organizations.
No, you
Yeah,
can
you
be
can be.
licensed or you can be licensed exempt, but there is a process for both. DCF has to say you are licensed exempt.
Understood. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ask one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Kristen, didn't, no, none of these are for the rural areas, are they?
One deeper person.
Deeper Purpose is High Springs.
Okay, great.
Is that what you meant of the six? Correct.
So I was sitting here thinking when you said you were gonna bring something back in August, I don't know how my colleagues, we talked about this billing and this funding that folks we've awarded and that they didn't use in this, may not use in this current term. And I'm hoping that there's a way we can get these 600 contracts, but those funds that end up that were awarded but not expended once the dust settles.
So we do that a lot at the county where we have vacancies or we have carry forward funds that weren't expended. We take that money.
Take that to, and we can go
move
back.
it into-
I don't know how we do that, but I'm just thinking, I know the RFP and the purchasing rules we have, they're stringent in a sense. And they have to be rigid because once we start going outside of that protocol, it's no need in having anything. So like Member Cornell says, I know the good work that's being done by Bishop Stokes and other entities that are out. It's just, we have to have those guidelines. We have to have some guidelines. And once the board adopts them, we have to follow them so that it makes it, we can't like bob and weave in and out and be selective about when and what policies we're going to. Now, if they need to be changed, we see they need to be changed and we have to address that. But what we have in place, we kind of have to stay that because that one time we got outside of it, they regretted it. I see Dr. Turba standing. Are you wanting before I close public comment? Yes, come on. If there's anyone else would like to comment on this motion, please queue up before we vote.
Ann Katurba, Aces in Motion, but we are in the cone of silence, so I want to be careful about what I say, right? I mean, are we still able to talk about it? We're not. Okay, well, we got in trouble. Anyhow, is there going to be any feedback allowed for any suggestions? I mean, we're very, we've done a lot of these grants. We appreciate the funding, blah, blah. I don't mean that, but is there any capacity for the people who filled out the grant proposals to have any constructive criticism or suggestions on how maybe we could avoid some of these issues or have a different, just feedback? Is there any plan for that?
Yes, so not only during contract negotiation, but everyone will also receive a survey after the end of the cone of silence to provide feedback about the RFP process.
Okay, and my second question is their plan, and I know Bonnie might have been talking about this earlier. All these I see these attachments that we're missing, and we've never really had to submit grant proposals this way. Normally it's an online thing. I know all of you who submit grants know that you upload documents and then you know that they're there, and you can't go on with the proposal unless they're there. And I wonder if there's a plan for a system like that where it's online rather than all these attachments, because when they do get submitted at the last minute, it gets and we do it too, we do it and it gets very stressful. And sometimes you could miss something because there's no feedback about whether you've, you try, but it's really cumbersome. So I just wonder if there's a plan to do that.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
SAMIS is in the works. Staff, as we speak, are working through the different parts of SAMIS to get it up and running. Not only will our funding opportunities be in SAMIS, as well as the data that we require, signatures, but invoicing. And so once we get it to a good place where everyone feels comfortable, but also having our providers help us work through some of the challenges so that before we, implement it.
That was my third thing. I would volunteer to check out.
Yes,
and see
yes.
if it's user friendly or if there's any flaws in the system.
And SAMIS stands for
Thank you. Bonnie?
Service Activities Management Information Systems. SAMIS.
So SAMIS, I think the state of Florida used to use it as its ERP system, and it was
There are some names that have some PTSD components. I live with Samus for many years.
Yes. So I'm hoping that Samus is improved.
This is Samus 3.2, so.
Listen, so my experience, come on, good citizen, my experience with some ERPs, I'm like Maggie just said, you have PTSD and they can start out so rocky. It doesn't matter what version or iteration of it, they can hardly ever get past that first blow up. And I'll leave it at that. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Addison Staples, Executive Director of Aces in Motion. I'd just like to, I guess, share some support for some of our colleagues and after-school programs that may have missed the mark. What seems like a policy issue that if policy is made, it can be changed and modified. So I would encourage the board to look at its policies with regards to whether the point, if it's late, that's a whole different subject than if we're missing documents. Because if we're missing documents, I would advocate that they at least get the opportunity to be scored based on their application. And then, let the chips fall where they may after that. And so that would allow a number of programs in that may have been missing some. And I don't know if that modification can be done in time, but there needs to be more after school programs than 5 that are funded with this whole county, or 6. I think that it's a good thing for all of us to advocate that there's more programs because our waiting lists are growing. We need other after school programs to help with the amount of students that are in. And if they were missing applications, I agree with Bishop Stokes. I share some concern that they have to wait a whole nother, we don't know when the next cycle is. So I would advocate that if there's any way to allow, but I don't know how that works because the reviewers have already reviewed the 6. And so I know I would be okay with those that got it in on time, maybe not with everything there, to get those reviewed by the same reviewers or something. I don't know. Policies can be changed, I guess is my point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. McBride.
So thanks, Addison. I appreciate that point. And I know some of the programs personally that didn't get funded, and it is always a serious thing, but every single RFP is going to have fatal criteria. And non-responsive is probably maybe not a great phrase. A lot of it is there was a fatal criteria that you didn't miss. You had to have a license, you had to have this or that. What I take away from this, and I've seen us progress, I have to say, we've added office hours. That was something new that we did not offer before. I get it. I mean, I know about delivering the grant application 5 minutes before it's due. And you run and hope traffic is good because you're dropping it off by hand. I get that. I've lived that. But I think that particularly for organizations that didn't get funded this cycle, what I would say is please, next time you apply, make use of those office hours. Maybe you aren't going to have your budget or your program narrative done until that 11th hour, but the list of attachments, your licenses, come get that checklist. I'm also hoping that one of the things we look at in August are level of funding criteria, so that if you're applying for, I don't know what the threshold would be, but an amount less than, perhaps there can be some fewer hoops to jump through. The more you're asking for funding wise, however, the likelihood that the fatal criteria and the requirements for accountability and upfront certification, assurances that we know you're going to be able to fulfill are going to be higher. So I think there's work to be done on both sides of that. Can we look at funding levels as distinguishing RFPs? Maybe we do some RFPs for after school that are not as large, so that we can be more inclusive and have fewer requirements. I think those are things that we can consider. I just would say there will always be fatal criteria. And if there's an opportunity ahead of the game to come in and get those checklist items cleared, use it. Thank you.
Any more public input? Anybody on the phone, Ashley? Anybody on the phone? All right, any other board discussion or comments?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm obviously in favor of the motion. I made it. I'm also though in favor of one of the things we talked about in our strategic plan was innovative and new things that we're doing. I know much of the work that Pastor Stokes is doing. I'm not sure about Mr. Miller is innovative. It's in the rural community. It's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. It's my idea of what we should be using fund balance and innovative stuff for. So hopefully our staff, once the cone is over, can kind of get with our providers, talk to them about what was missing, what are you doing, and bring us back some options for us to at least discuss so we can deploy that money where it's needed most. That's some comments.
All right, so we have to vote on this before Mr. Dion. All in favor of receiving the recommendation for funding for after school as presented by staff? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Great job, Seth.
Yeah.
I know this was a big lift,
A very big lift.
very, very big lift.
All right.
How y'all doing? I'm working on someone else's computer here, so I'm trying to
Mia?
figure it out.
I'm just had a question.
Thank you. All right, I'm here to present the youth mentoring RFP today. Before I get started, in your packet, you do have a staff report. I just want to bring us back to the background, how we got to this point. As a recommendation to expend unallocated funds, the trust staff presented mentoring and character building as a funding opportunity to address delinquency and truancy. The board approved the funding recommendation and instructed staff to bring back mentoring RFP for the board to consider in July, which we are here today to do. I'm here to do today, representing my team. So with that, during that time, we did a feedback session. Roughly 25 individuals was a part of that. This is part of a new funding pot of money, so that is a normal process. Supposed to get feedback from community providers doing this work and others who may be doing programs. So we did that session June 7th. Our work internally, we do our own research. We also looked at CSC in Jacksonville and Leon County, which had RFP around mentoring, looked at their work and did our research on that, as well as the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquent Prevention RFPs around youth mentoring as well. So we did our homework, which we come together today to put together this RFP presentation for you for recommendations to move forward with a youth mentoring RFP. This RFP is also aligned with our CTAC goal number 3, all children and youth live in a safe community. The timeline of the RFP, we're hoping to release this RFP on the 13th. Bidders conference on the 25th. Application deadline will be August 17th at 3 p.m. Application review period will be August 21st through the 25th. The review team final score deliberation, we will do August 28th. That will be live recorded. Recommendations to the board, we will come back to you with those recommendations after review on September 13th board meeting. Scope of services, CTAC seeks to assess youth mentoring programs offering elements of character building activities in one-to-one and group sessions that create supportive long-term relationships. We're looking to utilize the $500,000 that you allotted for this funding source to how any approved contract up to $75,000 per contract. That'll be roughly, if it hands out the way, 5 to 6. If the requests are lower than that, then we possibly can have more than 5 to 6 contracts come out of this pot of funding. Funded organizations will recruit, train, screen, support, and supervise individual adult mentors who will be matched with youth during this process.
Dion, can I ask you a question? So I'm reading this and I get the one-on-one mentoring and I had an organization came to mind, and I see group and it's saying one-on-one and group. So if an organization like Mirror Image came to us and their mentoring thing, I'm not sure if they do one-on-one. I know they do group mentoring. So are they precluded from applying for this or will they be able to apply for this?
This is our recommendation. When we did the feedback session, majority of the providers on that call only did group sessions. They identified their group sessions as character building only. It really wasn't mentoring. But the mentoring process, if you're going to do a mentoring, you need to have a component of one-on-one as well with the group session for this RFP process. So we're encouraging those who apply to implement a one-on-one, a part of their group session. And I'll get more into that guidelines around what we are requiring for this RFP.
All right. I just wanted to ask that before you got there because that was on my agenda.
Yeah, a lot of feedback was on the majority of the ones that was on that call are doing group sessions that we had in that feedback session. So we did take that in consideration when we met with all those providers, giving them opportunity to let us know what's going on, what they're doing.
But then what I'm hearing you say is you found that the evidence-based practice
Yes.
is one-on-one in addition to any
Correct.
group.
So that will be a requirement that if it's mentoring, so we're not just funding character building, which is what's taking place mostly in the group sessions. We didn't want to eliminate that because most of our programs are comfortable doing more group type programs, but to fund mentoring, the best practices and evidence-based is being able to match the youth with an adult, and they have that one-on-one also. And then you can still have some group sessions as well.
So I guess for me, and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm just like one-on-one group mentoring is, I know one organization is doing it, but a lot of mentoring is happening in programs that are doing it by grouping. And I think, so I'm hoping that we're not like screening them out. Like Big Brothers and Big Sisters is the only organization I'm knowing that I'm recalling that's doing a lot of one-on-one. So, and that's good if you can recruit mentors. A lot of them, their funding goes to their administrative staff. They're not paying their mentors. They're trying to get people who are coming in as volunteers. And there's a lot of churn in that. I think also there's also a lack a lot of times of representation of our target of mentors not being representative of the community of children that they're serving. So that's a problem for me. So, and then there's also that safety aspect. I think of some organizations want to do things in a group because with an adult with multiple children or multiple adults with children just for safety, child safety type thing. I'm no DCF person, but I'm just saying just on my horse for advocating and my working with youth when I was in that space with my own kids. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're not like setting up a process that is so stringent that we can't reach people. We don't give funding to people who are actually serving children and are working in this space. I mean, that is what I really feel that I, when I read this and why I just kind of stopped. Yes, member, Chance.
Thank you. So Take Stock in Children is one-on-one mentoring as well, but throughout COVID and needing to take things virtual, they made accommodations for group sessions, for I can mentor my mentee through an app that's monitored for safety reasons. They've had to offer more flexibility, particularly on the other side of COVID. And 4 hours, I would echo the point, 4 hours is a lot. If it was once a week, performance benchmark standards for Take Stock in Children, I think have been reduced to 2 1-hour sessions or 2 30-minute sessions. Just again, on the other side of COVID, people are having a harder time getting people back face-to-face for that level of commitment.
And I'm just going to tell you straight up, for me and I'm not an evaluator of any RFP that comes in, but I have an uneasiness of only funding administrative costs for an organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters. Then we have funded them in the past, and the volunteers that are serving the children aren't getting paid. To me, I want to have some direct impact on the youth, but that's just me. But I just had that question when I was reading this because it was saying like one-on-one and group, that you had to do both. And I'm like, wait, some people they don't do it, but that doesn't mean that they're not mentoring them. You have an organization who, you know, like Aces in Motion, that's mentorship in my opinion. It's after school also, but when you have them where they've got a person that tutor that's with the child, and they've got academic counseling that's going on, that's mentoring, because we're trying to transition students from one where they are in elementary and middle school, get them with a college mind going set or career to work. I think that's mentoring. So that's, but I'm not trying to like derail your presentation.
No, you're not. You're just making me speak more about this work that I've been doing. So
okay,
you bring up the big brothers and big sisters. They are
I'm sorry.
one-on-one.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of go the other way with this, you know, as far as if we're saying we're mentoring, having been involved with mentoring, how much of a relationship can you have? 30 minutes, you know, an hour a month. I mean, you know, I question that if you really want to change life, and it may, you know, I just have my own personal experience. You know, Mary sounds like she's got a lot more than I do, but if you really want to have a relationship with a child and try to change, make a difference in their life, I think it's going to take more than an hour a month. So, you know, we talk about change direction of children, and maybe the group setting doesn't. I don't know enough about it to know. I would like some more input about that before, because I'm not comfortable if we're going to say we're going to change a child's direction in their life, that an hour a month is going to do it.
So,
yes,
can I come somewhere in between? I'm trying to split this baby. So I think what we should say is, if you are saying that you do mentoring, then come to us. Perhaps it's not a 1 hour a week or 4 hours a month or group versus, but come to us with a documented evidence-based practice on mentoring. There's a national registry of evidence-based practices that cover a huge gamut. And maybe we don't dictate the practice. We evaluate whether it's consistent with what we're trying to accomplish in the RFP, but you have to come to us proposing an evidence-based approach to mentoring that can be group, that can be individual, that can be app-based, that can be depending on what it is that is trying to be accomplished. But there are evidence-based practices out there that have been researched, that have documented support. And if that's the approach that is included in the RFP, then I think we can evaluate whether it conforms to what we're trying to accomplish with it.
Member Cornell.
I really appreciate Member Chance's comments and actually both Member Pinkerson and Maggie's, because I'm thinking about what Pat said at the last meeting, which was the 3 R's: relationship, routine, and repetition. And I think if you have the relationship, you might be able to do 30 minutes because you have the relationship, but the mentoring is you've got to develop that and establish that. And I'm not sure, I guess we haven't gotten to the minimum qualifications yet, but those are, I'll let you keep going in your presentation. That's the 3 R's. It what jumped out at me when you also talked.
Ms. Andrew.
Madam Chair, if I may, so in the evidence that I've just seen is take stock, what the foundation's done forever, but it is that routine. 30 minutes a week is probably enough every week. So that's a couple hours or so a month, but that's what fits into our school schedules because of lunch schedules. And oftentimes that's when the mentors come to be with their mentees. And I think it's that longevity. Oftentimes they start in 7th grade, sometimes it's later, but it's that consistency for the kids. And then they don't have to face that abandonment. You know, so many of our kids, we go to the awards and we hear their stories when we do our celebrations at the end of the year and the scholarship stuff. And that's what it is, that relationship that's built over a long period of time that has everlasting impact. So, whatever that looks like, I know it's hard to get a provider for 7 years, but that's what works. And we can see it in what Take Stock has done here in Alachua County for our kids.
Yes.
And I think it can look different for different kids. I we used to have something with DCF called Camp for Champions, where we'd take foster kids and post-adoption kids out to a camp. And did one in 2014, I think, with 32 kids. It was chaos, but great. Did it for 3 days. So spent 3 days with these kids chasing and running and all of that. one of those kids is now 19. He was 10 at the time. He cried in the parking lot, didn't want to go to camp, and he latched on to me, and I became Mama Cheryl. And he's 19 now, and he still reaches out to me and we talk. And so mentoring can look very differently. I think it's again, the relationship. If you've got the right people building those relationships, it can happen, because I don't talk to him now, but every few months, and he reaches out if he's just having a hard time. But it can look differently in different programs and really be impactful in a child's life.
Relationship is the key. So I was gonna comment back on the Big Brothers Big Sisters who we currently contract, and I'm that contract manager. They not only do one-on-one matching, but they also do group activities throughout the year with their program. So it's not just a one-on-one. They do provide opportunities for them to come together with other kids and go to group activities, baseball games, things and such like that. So they do have a component. It's not in their design to showcase. It's more about the individual. They have different kind of setups. And you're right, every mentoring program is going to look different. A school-based program will look different than a community-based program for mentoring as well. So just wanted to throw that out there to address that. Set schedules are to be in a place to allow some flexibility so that mentors and mentees can identify dates and times that work well for their schedules in a one-on-one mentoring. Group session mentoring, an opportunity to engage youth and adult mentors in the character building activities. That can look very differently based on the focus of that individual provider's program and scope and curriculum they put together for their program and target population. So I heard you say foster kids, that's your target population, or you're trying to deal with kids who's more prone to get into trouble or has some kind of interaction with the law or whatever. That's a different kind of target population. They need more of a hands-on support for those situational kids. And then you just might have kids who want to have someone in their life, but they may be missing a male figure or such, or a female figure in their life in a positive manner. The best practices are to combine both into one. That's the best practices. I'm trying to get back to my frame of thought there. Yeah, I forgot. So I'll come back to me because I'm sure there's gonna be some more questions. So move to the next slide. The minimum requirements for this RFP. You see, must be currently qualified to conduct business in the state of Florida, must have experience working with youth in out of school time, must offer mentoring services to youth currently enrolled in elementary, middle school, or high school living in Alachua County, must offer one-to-one group mentoring sessions, must comply with the DCF Level 2 background screen and fingerprinting requirements in accordance with Florida state statutes, and must have at least 1 year experience offering youth mentoring services with elements of character building activities. Our targeted population, of course, is youth located in Alachua County. The term of the service of this contract will be October 1st through September 30th, 2024. And the evaluation criteria that we put together will revolve around program description, up to 30 points, project implementation, agency stability and capacity building and budget.
Yes, Dan, Member Pinkerton had a question.
Okay, and I'm gonna be
You good? No, we good.
None of these really go to whether or not it's making a difference. And I know that's gonna be a bear to determine, but how do you determine whether or not it's successful? Because, this goes like when we were doing the other programs about that did the children show up? Okay, whether or not, to me, that's not a factor as are we making a difference? So in our evaluation, how are we going to tell if we're making a difference?
This is for the scoring. Now we have also coming up another slide that's gonna kind of address your questions.
Okay.
It may not be in your packet, because there was an update today, I believe, right, Krista?
Okay.
It's not in their package, that update.
That is correct.
That's because I made a phone call this morning and said, I'm going to ask about this. So
Yeah.
I'm glad.
We are addressing it.
So this is gonna be addressed. So we
Back
were
to the-
prepared for you.
I didn't want to surprise you.
Oh, no.
Self-reference.
And I'll call up my colleague, Bonnie, to address your question.
Okay, so here we have our performance measures for the mentoring RFP that we have in mind. Of course, they might be subject to change given the applicants we get and our discussions tonight. But as we originally put it forth for our how muches, we wanted to definitely track the youth who are receiving the mentorships, the adults who are providing the mentorships, and the number of mentorship contacts and the number of group mentoring sessions. So when we get more into the how well components, we know it's really important to provide appropriate support and training to our mentors so they're doing a good job building relationships and connecting with the youth. And that there's many measures of how the program staff provide backbone support and training and check-ins and quality assurance. But one of those that I picked out was that those mentors are receiving at least monthly check-ins with the programmatic staff so they can share if they're having difficulties with their in connecting, or if something came up and they didn't know how to handle it. But also there's other components that will be important for establishing how well the mentoring is happening. Another is the percent of parents and caregivers who receive programmatic check-ins. We know family engagement is so important, and that all the mentor, the youth, and the parent are all on the same page and working towards that. So we knew even in the call that was one of the things that everybody really agreed on, and that parent engagement and family engagement was very important. So that was one of the whole how wells. For the one that's kind of the hot topic one was the percent of youth receiving an average of 2 or more mentorship contacts per month. And then the one below it reflects the longevity of the relationship, that we know that the relationship will develop over time. And we know, so there's frequency, there's intensity, which is how many hours or how long, how much contact, because you can meet 5 times for 15 minutes, or you can meet 2 times for 4 hours. So that was one I included frequency and duration. But yeah, this is just original thoughts to share with you for Better Off. We wanted to measure the youth who report relational satisfaction and closeness with their mentor. We know that's a key thing that we hope that youth feel cared about, and that will then inspire other important outcomes, that they're doing well and making gains in their social emotional skills, that they're building their confidence, their self-esteem, their ability to have positive peer relationships, which would be measured by a youth outcome assessment. We also want to look at the percentage of youth with no Department of Juvenile Justice involvement. That was one of the impetuses for the RFPs, and one of the categories that falls under for us. Again, we don't have a data sharing agreement with the Department of Juvenile Justice. That would be just something that we would ask for youth to report on an outcome survey. And then for the youth, the percent of youth who are doing well are making improvements in school performance. Again, not actual grades, but how their attitude towards school, whether they feel like they're making that they're working hard at their grades, whether they feel that they're doing well towards school, and that their attitude towards school is one where they feel like school is important, and seeing gains, or that they already are reporting that they're doing well with those. So those were the performance measures we have in mind for this, and really based upon similar programming offering, like, that there's kind of a consistency of a one-on-one plus a group mentoring component, and there's a good amount of intensity, frequency, and longevity. You'll see for the last how well I have IE, blah, blah, blah. And usually for the brevity of the slide, I don't include a lot of the specifics, but each one of these have more details of how we would measure it, what would be in the numerator, what would be in the denominator, what's the tool we would use. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. But yeah, I think once we see who we get back, it will, and once we hear the input on what the board
Wait just
wants.
So I thank you, Bonnie, for that. I believe, does that address what you wanted? So I glad you got what you wanted there. I think in the minimum qualifications though, and Maggie made a suggestion that the applicants propose evidence-based, how they would come forth with this, but I think it's still imperative that it's important that we change that criteria that they must offer one-on-one and group mentoring sessions to be and/or. I just would disagree with that. I think if you're gonna ask people to do it,
I would disagree. I think the one-on-one, even if it's just identifying a lead person within the mentorship process, that's gonna be that person's mentor, identified lead. But I think it is the relationship, and I think one-on-one has to be some portion of that component. Not all kids are gonna relate equally well to all the people in the program. So I think the ability to match, I do think there has to be I agree that we don't need to prescribe the 1 hour a week. I don't think that's as critical. Frequency versus intensity, you can always have less frequency if the intensity is better. But I do think that there has to be a relationship component to this. And that's why that's what the evidence-based approaches all say. So I would not want to, I'm comfortable reducing any specific hourly requirement, but not the one-on-one entirely.
And having that backs up what Maggie said, because we'll see if you do reduce it, whether or not it's working when they fill out the survey. So.
And may I comment that some youth are more prone to open up with a person on a one-on-one than in a group session as they're dealing with some challenging things. They may not open up and you may not know what's really going on with a child in a group session. So the one-on-one component does provide that opportunity with that relationship building for a child to maybe say something that they may be afraid to say in front of their peers, whether it's happening at home or whatever. And I tell you this from experience. So that's why we feel it's important to have a component of one-on-one with their group activities as well, because all kids will not open up in a group session. And the relationships are not built as strong as they are with a one-on-one.
And for some kids, it'll be the opposite. So they may require less one-on-one time. That's why I want that flexibility and how much one-on-one time, but I think it's a critical component.
Well, and I think especially if we're talking about foster youth, having that attachment, that ability to have that one person, just to attach to one person with consistency is so important.
My guardian ad litem programs work so well, right?
Yes.
Member Cornell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the performance measures, will they be in the RFP that this is how you will be evaluated?
Yes.
So they will, as they're writing their program, they will be addressing hopefully these items that they'll be measured. Okay, great. Move staff recommendation.
And I have one last comment that I did.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay, so then moved in second. Yes, member.
So the one recommendation, Bonnie, is 0 and 100% are dangerous outcome measures. So I would say reduce juvenile justice contacts. Some of these youth, if you can get them from 10 to 1, you're doing like great work.
All right, so is there any public input?
Still have one more slide.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. We got them. So the motion was, Ken, that's what I thought you were done.
Yeah, you made the motion. I didn't even ask.
Great job.
I knew where you were going.
Trying to talk us out of the motion? You talking us out of the motion?
No.
I just want to make sure you're approving everything the correct way. We asked the trust to approve the release of the RFP. The trust has asked that to authorize the $500,000 for youth mentoring programs for the fiscal year 23-24. The trust is asked to authorize the executive director to appoint a review team of members with subject matters and expertise.
And I just want to thank staff for putting in that extra slide. That was very helpful. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, Christy.
I just wanted to clarify that the request is that the applicants must recommend an evidence-based mentoring curriculum.
approach curriculum.
Approach.
Some of them are going to be canned curricula. I mean, it depends on what you choose. But I think it has to be an evidence-based approach.
Okay, okay, we did receive some pushback during our input session. Some of them have the more grassroots approach. I've created kind of my own versus evidence-based. So I just want the board to clarify so that we have the correct language in the RFP so that you all are aware.
I think that falls under innovative versus evidence-based.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
Any public input?
Yep.
Public input.
You want on the phone, Angela? You want on the phone?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Romulus, Executive Director of Made for More. I wanted to comment on the group session. And so I grew up inner city Miami to a single mother. And one of the things that impacted me unofficially was sports. And in that context of sports was in many ways like a group mentoring session. We would come, our coach would share life lessons with us through the context of sports. And when things penetrated one of the athletes, we would approach them and ask, can we have a time to talk to you one-on-one? And I share that because our approach, I think we're putting the cart before the horse in the sense of during these group activities, students have their guards down. They're having adults joining them in the group activities that we provide. And most of the time it leads to the one-on-one sessions, the one-on-one times where things are kind of being broken down, they're sharing, they're being vulnerable, transformation is taking place. And so I would say for us, our approach is we have our group sessions, and then from there, we have our mentors meet with the students twice a month. And so I would encourage, instead of having it where it's one or the other, to have both and, because I think a lot of students are being mentored and challenged in those group activities. And then from there, we can go and say, hey, do you need one-on-one reinforcement, and not necessarily force the kid, because a lot of the kids are being changed and impacted just with the group session alone. And some of them need that extra one-on-one time. So I would encourage, or, as Madam Chair shared, recommend the board to have it where it's both and not pitting one against the other. Thank you for your
I don't think the
time.
intent was to pit them against the other at all. I think both and is the way we're thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Chris Arrington, Girls Place Executive Director. I am feeling protective of the team because we're doing this to y'all again. And so my hope is maybe there's some systemic opportunities for change so that the staff can get feedback before they put in all this work and then think changes are made. That's one. The other thing is background screenings. So my knowledge is just in childcare. And so background screenings can be limiting. And so we weren't able to hire a bus driver that works for the school system because DCF said no. And so to keep that in mind, that background screenings may limit the success of this RFP.
Hey, Christy, what you mean? You mean like when you say limit the success, you mean limit the number of people, limit the people who hirees, yeah. People who can hire or people who can participate.
So I don't know the best practices for mentoring programs, but if you're working with us and you're volunteering more than 10 hours a month, then you have to be background screened. And for us, we want to background screen anybody. And so if a student comes in from UF and they volunteer 2 hours, they're still going to be screened because that's the level of scrutiny that we want. And so depending on the expectations for mentors, if they are being screened the same way that our team is, then some won't be eligible. And ours most recently was a felony 30 years ago. And so it's just, and we got information from Christy for people to appeal that, but it's a process. And is it worth going through the process if it's going to take several months? Or do you move on to another opportunity?
It can take, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on what the backlog is at any given time. And there are some felonies you cannot overcome.
Public money. Yeah. Thank you, Kristen.
Good evening, Addison Staples with Aces in Motion. I just, great presentation, Dion, and I think this is a great venture for funding and a much needed funding. So thank you for making it a priority, and I like the direction it's heading. My question, it kind of goes back to the last month's question I kind of made with regards to how we determine which funding to go for depending on which bucket. And, you know, because we want to work with providers that are providing the service, because we don't do we do mentoring in as Madam Chair suggested and inferred, but we also like to bring people in that are experts in it. And I guess my question is, without knowing, I heard a comment saying we're not funding character building in this one, we're funding mentoring, but we do pay out for our character development and skills. That is a high cost to our program. So my question is enrichment going to be an RFP coming out fairly soon? Because we have to plan this whole school year out. And as of right now, I believe enrichment is set to sunset with their funding in less than 6 months, something like that. And so I need to know as executive director who I may be looking for as a partner and maybe being written in on their RFP for this mentoring one, or do I need to, wait for the enrichment? And it's just getting a little confusing with, but I don't even know if enrichment RFP is coming out, and because that decision hasn't been made yet. So I guess my question is same from last week, which is if we can know what buckets, which funding it's in, it'll help providers that do multiple things, because from a holistic whole child approach, we want to make sure that we cover every area. So that would be super helpful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Enrichment is a 3-year contract, and so they are funded through the next fiscal year. So enrichment RFP won't come out until fiscal year 25.
We can do it in 24, so it's combined with summer camps.
Right.
So those contracts being in the summer 2024, when they're taking in September, we're enrichment. And we're gonna have RFP.
So enrichment contracts run through summer of 2024. September 30th of 2024. So there will probably be an RFP out in the spring of 24 is what I'm, if I'm mistaken.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That other question that he had, I guess you all will reach out as to so that providers will know which bucket to apply for. Sorry.
I see that as a sort of, what's your organizational identity? What's the major thing you do? If you provide after school care in a comprehensive program, you're going to mentor, you're going to tutor, you're going to do mental health, you're going to do all of that. But what's your core identity? And I think that's the bucket you go for.
Mr. Miller.
James Miller again, Executive Director of Mirror Image Leadership Academy. Awesome presentation. I would like to thank the staff. I too want to echo, will organizations have the opportunity to build to that? Because I know for Mirror Image Leadership Academy, we're a 3-year leadership development and discovery experience. And so we don't have volunteers. We pay all of our staff. And so our mentoring is more so in the group context and in the group setting. And we have an entire curriculum that's built around character development. And so I want to know if the minimum requirement can be or, along with what Chair Certain was saying, and not one-on-one and group. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I respect my colleagues who have earned advanced degrees and may depend on evidence. I didn't grow up in inner city Miami. I grew up like less than a mile from around this building right here, okay? And the folks who served me as a youth and had a tremendous impact on me and a lot of children just like me, they ain't have a children's trust and they ain't have evidence-based. It was through sports programs. It was through a group of parents forming an after-school program, a summer and after-school program over at Wilhelmina Johnson, and they had no evidence, but they provided a safe space. They took us to the jail and told us that we didn't want to come there, did a tour. That's one thing I do remember. We did a whole lot of things, but the one thing I do remember is the movie Bad Boys was out by Sean Penn. And they arranged a tour to the county jail. And I went there and I said, I'm never going back. I don't know if there was any evidence to that or not, but those are the type of things they did. So I'm saying all this to say, I stand by my plea to you all for us to not have this where it's just one or the other, because I think there are organizations that are doing. So I have to kind of like say this to Maggie so we don't violate sunshine, because when I'm reading it, it's you're saying they have to do one-on-one and they have to do group. I don't, that's how I'm reading it. I'm seeing it. If there's no one-on-one component here, it doesn't matter if they do things in a group.
That's it. So I hear what you're saying, and I think everybody has had those kinds of experiences that have been very powerful, and some of them have been in a group. I can't remember now who it was mentioning, you know, that I think it was the gentleman who has one of the organizations, and he says the group comes first, do it first, that introduces you, gets your appetite, and then as things break down, you develop a one-on-one relationship. But I think ultimately it's the one-on-one relationship that can occur within a context. So league, you know, is wanting us to have performance measures. When you're trying to do something that leads to something else not happening, right? So when you're doing anything that's prevention focused, outcomes happen 10, 15 years down the road. And so the reason I'm pushing for an evidence-based approach is that they have been gathering that evidence that this approach compared to these other approaches 10 years down the road, we have actually measured and seen the impact. That's not to say that other things can't. A concept that I find very useful is I think about evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence, and you can have both. Ken mentioned a little while ago, so that might be falling under what we fund under innovation. If you think you've got an approach to a problem that hasn't been tried but has merit, and you've begun to develop this, then the grant, to Addison's question, apply for an innovation grant for proof of concept that lets you build the practice-based evidence to support that innovative approach. And by the way, that's how evidence-based practices get to be evidence-based practices. So I think we need to think about those things. And if we're going to say we want to support mentoring, and we know that there are evidence-based approaches that have a higher probability, because it's never going to be 100%, but they have a higher probability that's been documented of success, that's where I want to put big bucks to start. Do I also want to fund programs that say I have a somewhat different understanding or approach and think has merit? Then let's develop it through an innovation grant that says, here's the practice-based evidence for that approach. That's how I look at that.
Go ahead, Member.
I hear you, Madam Chair. Let me just ask a couple questions, because I'm with Maggie on this, but you know, you can change my mind, and you oftentimes do. So Christy, the question is, this is a new programming thing, and it's come basically from the community, because the community has come to us and said, we need this in our community. We came up with $500,000 with a max of 75,000. How many groups have we spoken to that would potentially be applying for this funding that you know of?
That I know of, I think we have 11 on the call, and then so about a total of 12, because we had 11 on the call, and then we had some separate, you know, conversations with people who couldn't make the call.
Gotcha.
So of those 11, they are interested in applying for.
Yeah, so so thank you. Hearing that, I think I'm gonna go with Maggie, but I would like folks to apply that maybe don't have the established evidence-based approach, so we can see what the additional need may be if we don't award those programs, because I'm all for innovation and I'm all for new things that are working in a neighborhood that are neighborhood specific, because they know what needs to be done in that neighborhood. So
And I would support that as long as then they tell us how they're going to figure out whether they've had an impact or not.
And I don't know what it is
that
because
practice-based evidence
we've
is
never
okay.
done. This. So we're going to put out an RFP and then we're going to start to get data from our community about what people are offering. So I'd like to start out with what staff's recommended.
That's what the motion is.
Yes.
I was just wanted to clarify with evidence-based practices. There's a repository of them that can inform program development. So it could be that you're developing an innovative new program, but you're not creating it, not informed by something that hasn't worked in another community or context.
Right.
So I think getting that information out on the front end to
Is very-
applicants
yeah.
would be really
So you'd
helpful.
be referring to this
Right.
program.
And just to give you a really good example, Ken, that you and Lee are familiar with, and so is Judge Ferrero, when we started putting together the criminal justice, mental health, substance abuse, the CJIM SAG grants.
Yeah.
We could not do what's called an assertive community treatment team because the funding that was available in the grant was not sufficient for that. But what we developed in this community was based on assertive community treatment. It was based on what the research was showing were the essential elements of assertive community treatment that we were then able to incorporate into that grant and develop then the practice-based evidence that has over the years shown how effective the program has been. So that I think is an absolutely essential point.
So that, there's resources like, I think it's mentor.org that has, people you can talk to or look at in
And the
program
National
design.
Registry of Evidence-Based Practices also has those.
Okay, so staff can be helping those applicants identify
Proactively.
those resources prior to filling out their application. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I thought you were going to ask some questions of me so I could help you. With that.
If she said 4, then I was going to say, let's open it up. But I heard was 12. And I think we got to hear from that. So I was trying.
You were trying. Okay. All right. I'm convinced that there's some that are going to be able to write something that will come up because I represent a body who says that they use evidence-based practices, and they got about 70% of children that look like me who can't read on grade level. So just because you bring forth an initiative and you say it's evidence-based, don't mean that it's always reaching its target. All of that, right? So and then we have a little organization of Peak Literacy, who they're using something that's evidence-based and smaller, and they're having much better outcomes. So I mean,
but they're using evidence-based. They would qualify.
that
would qualify. So that works. So that would work.
That would work.
But I mean, you have some teachers who they may do something that may not be in the little evidence. But anyway, so hopefully we got some folks who will be able to, that are not necessarily one-on-one, who do some group that'll be able to write their grant and tailor it as innovative, and this is what they do, and they think they'll have good outcomes. All right, if there's no more public input, we're ready to vote. All in favor of moving forward with staff recommendation? Aye. Motion passed.
That's the next one. I move approval
Second. I got to be in my.
Veterans preference policy, okay, and recruitment plan. Is there any discussion? Who was with the staff person setting that up since Director Khan is? Yeah, the
Is Danielle.
Hi.
She's online.
all right, so, does anyone have any board members have any questions on that policy? It's pretty standard policy. They say any public input? Any calls, Ashley, on this one? Right, so, move staff recommendation on adopting a veterans preference hiring policy. All in favor? Opposed? Passes. All right, 16, for your information, ELO certificate of appreciation. Item 16. Oh, hey. And thank you. So, you want to come up, Mr. Lopez, if you, we had it in our, what's happening?
Got a joint meeting at 7.
Oh, okay, all right. Yes.
County and city.
Question about that.
Yeah. Lots of people got questions.
Oh, good. So they gave us your certificate in our packet there. You can set it up if you like.
Okay, well, thank you. It's not something I do every day. I'm just learning this, how y'all, I don't know how y'all do it, but just thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is the first event that I had. It was scheduled for the 18th. The weather said it wasn't going to be well, but it was amazing. But so I had to postpone it, and I did, but we still had over 200 people. To me, that was amazing for the first one, especially with it being postponed. And I did the certificate because I wanted to do more, but we don't have the funds like that. So, but I wanted to show you how much I did appreciate what you guys did. And I can only imagine, like when I walked in, how you catch the end of a conversation. When I came to the meeting, you were saying something about $14 million. So if y'all don't have nowhere to put that money, I got some amazing ideas. Amazing. So just keep that in mind. From the bottom of my heart, from Everyone Loves One Another nonprofit, we truly appreciate y'all. We have some other things that we're working on. In fact, we're working on something for the community, I think for Labor Day or sometime in the next couple of months or so. I'm just learning the ropes and I'm very excited. So is this the board? Oh, so who is this?
Staff.
So y'all work for the Children's Trust, and this is the board of the Children's Trust,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. It's nice to meet everybody.
All right.
All right. So, I'm telling you, I'm good at what I do. I know and I'm not ashamed of what I don't know until I learn. So, but from the bottom of my heart, I know I did read where you had 3 minutes. So do you have any questions? If you have any questions, but if you don't, I just want to take a real quick picture with y'all real quick selfie. Okay. So y'all just do a little thumbs up or something. You know what I'm saying? Thumbs up. Y'all too.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Open up time now for general public comment. If you have anyone, thank you.
We need to play that video at the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, we'll play, Suzanne, we'll work out the kinks and we'll play a video at the next meeting since we're trying to get Member Cornell out.
I don't
Okay?
want them to.
Any board member comments or requests for staff? All right, seeing none, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.